Yeah, there's something mentioned about Heinz as well. Because there's like a week in between episodes, I think it was just sort of like a catch up for the audience.
So you're saying this is a Heinz ketchup?
Oh, so good, so good.
Oh god, okay.
Welcome to the Macross Delta Recap Show. This is EXO, along with the magical girl who stopped playing Pokemon Go long enough to do this show, Celia Rose,
Hey everybody.
and our resident mecha expert that'll gladly plug into that island ship just to fill that void, Chad.
Hey, everybody.
All right, so episode 14. That one is embracing adrift. Yeah, so last week we took a we took the day off, the whole week off because we just didn't get the subs in time. And, let's just do a double episode, I said. And everybody was down because nobody wanted to do it. So episode 14 opens with a Mikumo dream sequence. She wasn't sure if it was a dream or not.
Oh, it was a really cool sequence. I loved it so much. She was actually singing one of Heinz's wind songs, and you get this brief glimpse of her in front of that weird protoculture base that appeared in the previous episode. And it feels like a dream, but it also feels like something that's actually happened. And when she wakes up, she says, oh, a dream, like kind of like not so sure what to make of it herself. And I don't know if this is a glimpse into what's to come for Mikumo or if it'll give us any more information about her. But now she finally has a mysterious Venus aspect to her. Like, finally, after 13 episodes, there's something about her that I'm like, what is it? And I want to know more.
Yeah, Mikimo, she's mysterious even to herself. She was like, "What's going on here?" But did you like the sequence because that was probably like the best dress that she had on?
Oh, it was so cool. I've started calling it the protoculture queen outfit because, well, she's not the wind singer, then that's the other answer. She's got to be the protoculture queen, at least with the direction this show is going. So it looks really neat. Unfortunately, Walkure has been burdened with some pretty ugly costumes in this show. So now that she finally got something really cool looking, it definitely appealed to my aesthetic. But I like that we finally get something to actually be curious about with Mikumo.
It was an interesting sequence. I'm not really sure if we got anything out of it as far as story or character, but it looked visually interesting. Yeah, not much else to say about it, unfortunately.
Photoculture Queen, trademark, Celia Rose.
That's right. I tweeted it first.
You did.
I did.
So after this, we see kind of a brand new opening sequence. It's just kind of like that scene from episode 13 where Freya jumps off the Elysion. And there was a lot of people kind of complaining that, what? That's all we get for the second opening? That's it? What's wrong with these guys?
I mean, it was kind of one of those things like, in case you forgot, here's what happened last week type of things. And if it was like a mid season split between cores, then I think that would make sense.
I liked it.
But since we just saw the events in the last, like it was neat to see it again. I mean, it was a cool sequence the first time, but because there was such a short gap of time between it, literally just a week later, I was kind of like, okay, just reminding us of everything that happened up to this point that occurred last Sunday, I suppose. But it was neat. They even had like Freya shouting, like the way she did in
Yeah.
the. It's almost like they like used the audio from that episode. They like ripped it and used it for the opening sequence.
Yeah, when she jumped, her
Mm-hmm.
voice goes up. Let's get into the Windermere part of this episode because there's not really a lot as far as they're concerned. There's actually two scenes that are almost the same. It was Heinz and Royd talking to each other. Then the other one was just a scene of Keith. Yeah, not a lot of Windermere involvement in this episode.
Yeah, it just seems like they're just playing catch up, I guess, on the events that happened last time, sort of reiterating in dialogue what we were shown mostly through action in the previous episode. That Keith has been hurt as a result of his sort of loss to Hayate and Freya. And then Royd is sort of like talking about him, I guess, being in charge, and also, yeah, there's something mentioned about Heinz as well, about how his responsibilities or something like that are going to be coming up, and in the next episode we see even more of that. But yeah, it's sort of like just, I guess, just because there's like a week in between episodes, I think it was just sort of like a catch up for the audience.
So you're saying this is a Heinz ketchup?
Oh, so good, so good.
Oh god, okay. So Windermere. Yeah, so what they're showing is I was actually kind of surprised at the state that Keith was in. And I thought he was gonna get like, a gnarly scar and be fine, because Bogue, when he was shot down, was able to get out of the cockpit and be just fine. But Keith is unconscious, hooked up to an oxygen machine. So things aren't going very well for Windermere. Like, it's kind of like showing us that each side is kind of licking their wounds from the last battle. I mean, the king is dead. They have to prepare for his funeral. They have to prepare for Heinz's coronation since he's the crown prince and next in line. And Royd is also scheming something really big because he's claiming to have the last will and testament of the king and to have, heard like saying that I have the will of the king. And you find out what that is in episode 15. But as far as the audience is concerned, there hasn't been any sort of last will that has been talked about at any point in the series. So the fact that Royd is bringing it up now is kind of a red flag that something big is going to happen for Windermere in the upcoming core for the rest of the series.
Man, I can't wait to talk about the next episode. Let's just rush through this one.
I know, right? I'm so ready to talk about 15.
We're over it. Most of this episode happens in the island ship because they're running out of supplies. They weren't really expecting to evacuate people out of Ragna that quick. I guess the events that follow in this episode is just how they go about solving that problem. It opens with I guess the Delta squadron is flying around. Why were they flying around?
They were repairing the outside of the ship. So, like, Walkure was distributing supplies and food to the refugees inside the ship. And then I know Chuck definitely was helping repair on the outside. And he was actually, like, having a really hard time because he didn't know yet where his family was. This episode also kind of confirmed my worst fears for Marianne, the oldest sister.
Does it really confirm it?
She got hit by a wall of water in episode
Yeah.
13 from that bomb. Like, I mean, some people were making the argument that, she's Rognan and they're an aquatic people. But when you get hit with a wall of water at that speed,
It's like cement.
I don't think she's going to make it.
The only reason I asked, because I was convinced that she didn't make it, because yeah, how do you make it through that? Was that Chuck said something like yeah, I'm sure she's okay. And I know that he's probably just saying it just to make those kids feel better, but
But he honestly doesn't know. Yeah, he's outside repairing the ship, and he doesn't even know like what's happening yet. Like he doesn't even know the extent to which his family has been like. He just knows that some of them, like most of them, I guess, survived or something like that. I think that's it. But he doesn't know what happened to the one person there. What's her character name again? Sorry.
Marion.
The subs had her as Marianne. I thought her name was Maria, but I think I misheard her name the first time. I was calling her Chuck's sister for the longest time. So
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was Marianne. Just listening to him talk without the subs, it sounded like he was saying Maria, but after watching the subs, I think it was Marianne. It was just like a pronunciation thing. Aside from the stuff that's going on with the Rognians, we see Lauren Valen talking to a couple of reps, three reps from the UN Spacey, right? The new UN Spacey, and he's giving them a report about what he found in at Rogna concerning the protoculture ruins.
yeah, Lori Valen's such a douche waffle. I do not like this guy.
You're not supposed to like
You're
him
not
though. That's the
supposed
whole
to
thing.
like him. I think he's like, yeah, he's so intentionally like a caricature that
Yeah,
it's pretty he's pretty one note, and
I
it's
like
just
what he
like,
brings though, because it's interesting.
well, it's fun. I think it's fun to hate him. I think is the part that I do get, like what you do get out of him as the audience member. But he's pretty like, yeah, he's set up to be like the douchey face of the new UN government, the new unified government, I should say. And yeah, so I think as a result, we end up not thinking too much of the new unified government because he basically is like an extension of them, right? He's the face of them.
Well, in this sequence in particular, too, like, it's not adding to the image of the new unified government in a positive way either, because they're
No.
talking about how, oh, well, the song had milder effects than we were anticipating. Like, they were expecting something else, but then they talked about how they suppose that the Windermerians haven't figured out the full power of the ruins. And what I got from that is that the new unified government knows more than they're letting on, at least for the sake of the audience, and that there is more to it that will probably come into play later. Since Royd is all about the protoculture, I'm sure that once the analysis of the Sigervalens is complete, that they'll be able to unlock that full potential. But just some of the commentary that the representatives for the new unified government were making just were not adding to their already less than stellar representation in the show.
Yeah, they seem very distant and very aloof about the whole thing and not like, engaged. And they also like I guess they're criticizing like previous attempts or something like that. Like this isn't the first time they've done something like this, they mentioned in the episode, and they were sort of critical of what's happened in the past and hope that like those problems can be resolved in future endeavors, I guess. So, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
they
kind of
sounded kind of almost like it was like a chore. Like they were like,
yeah,
if the operation had succeeded 7 years ago, it wouldn't have come to this type of thing.
yeah.
So yeah, I don't. I know we're not supposed to like them because like Windermere is portraying them badly, and then we find out that things didn't really go the way the new unified government has presented them. But it's just really bad.
I'm not really sure where they're going with that actually, because I don't really have all that much sympathy for the Windermerians, period. Like I realize that yeah, the new unified government is definitely being portrayed as a villain of sorts, for
Mhm.
sure. And there's probably going to be some sort of comeuppance for them like later on in the show. But I'm not really sure where exactly they're going with this. Because like the Windermerians are pretty despicable, like especially their tactics. I mean, they're basically stealing like free will from anybody they encounter for like their own aims. And I'm still not entirely like even at this point in the series, I wasn't entirely convinced that their motives were like, as limited or altruistic as they think. I mean, clearly not, right? I mean, we've caught them in their hypocritical like stance on issues before. The characters have, I mean, sorry, in the series. So it's
Mhm.
like I don't really hold much sympathy for them at all. I mean, I realize that the story of Macross Delta is trying to portray them as multifaceted, but I'm really not getting it so far.
Yeah.
They come across as very like one note and very like uncompromising, which is like pretty lethal in any sort of war situation, right? When you're
Hmm.
just like you're not willing to like consider like your enemy at all, sort of thing. It's just like that's because they're when you do that you like dehumanize, so it's like yeah, I'm not really feeling it. I assume that this will lead to something, that there will be some sort of reward for the different sides of the characters and the two factions that are fighting in this war, but yeah, for right now I'm pretty solidly on Chaos's side. Maybe not the new unified government, but Chaos. I'm definitely with Chaos for sure.
Yeah.
And just the people too. Like I just like all the people of the Brisinger cluster. I consider them all victims, right? Because of what the Windermerians have done to them, and they have been. They've been poisoned and manipulated, and then mind controlled, and it's horrifying, absolutely horrifying. So yeah, I'm not really feeling anything. Not much in the way of sympathy from the Windermerians anyway. Hopefully that they'll do something with that. Maybe they will present some other things, but for right now, yeah.
Yeah, they even tried in the following episode, like they tried to kind of give him a humanizing element, and then
Especially the
and then
knights,
they
especially
like
the
and then they
knights.
like
Yeah.
kind of ripped it out from under our feet like later
Yeah.
in the second half of that same episode, and I'm like, all right, guys, what was the point of that?
Yeah.
So I don't know. Yeah, so far like our villains are just very. There's not a lot of depth to them. It's just we're bad guys and we're here type of thing is kind of
Yeah.
what I'm getting from all of it.
Yeah, at best we're given the tragedy of what happened to them, but which might explain why they are the way they are, right? So that's sort of what we've been giving at least so far in the story, in the actual like episodes of Macross Delta. It's like, okay, the new unified government dropped a bomb on them, and that's what happened. And then here the new unified government is willing to sacrifice the better part of a colony just to make sure that the Windermereans don't get their way. And it is like awful and despicable and stuff like that. But then you have the Windermerians who, but despite all their propaganda and what they may talk about the new unified government, their tactics are even more despicable. In fact, they might even be greater crimes against humanity than like 1,000 reaction bombs, because they steal people's like lives and minds and souls away from them, right? the
Yeah.
very the very essence of their own humanity, so that they can't actually, they it's not even like propaganda isn't even like the right word to use. It's outright like crime against humanity. It's like stealing people's own minds away from them. And it's just, yeah, it's horrifying. It's actually terrifying. I mean, I know they don't deal with the actual like psychological and legal consequences of what they're doing in this war, but just as an outside viewer, when you think about what's actually happening to the people of the Brisingar cluster under with the Windermereans control, it's absolutely horrifying. It's one of the worst fates I can imagine, is having your own mind taken away from you.
Yeah, I think that's a problem with the story itself, that they made the Windermereans so brutal with their actions and intent that they bring in the new UN Spacey as even more, like you said, despicable. Just so when you try to get the audience's sympathy for the Windermereans, that they go too far with the new UN Spacey and their tactics. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like you pulled too far, because in the beginning, the first episode, you see I think it was Bug that destroyed the entire ship with just shooting into the launch pad of one of those ships. The
Yeah, he transferred into Gerwalk mode, I think it was, and
Yeah,
fired inside the launch bays of like a Guantanamo class carrier and blew the whole thing up himself.
yeah.
That's like a loss of like, hundreds of lives,
And I think the problem is that you try to present your villains as super evil in the beginning, and then with Macross, you try to say like, oh, your enemies aren't that bad. You could get along with them at the end. So now you're bringing in a factor that's even more despicable, and then you try to gain sympathy for these bad guys that did unspeakable stuff in the beginning.
Yeah.
You get cornered into your own story.
Yeah, I think that's the problem here. Yeah. I can feel the way the writers are telling us that we're supposed to be feeling, ambivalence towards the new unified government, if not outright contempt for what they did to the Windermereans. But
Yeah,
at the same time, we're supposed to be sympathizing with the Windermereans because of that fact. But then
yeah,
every episode, the Windermereans, like right now, like mostly stuff that's happened in the past, except for the reaction bomb. That's the first thing that the new unified government has done in this series in the current age, like in this current setting, that's
mhm,
been very, very questionable and very unethical, that sort of thing, right? But that's one example. The rest of the episodes, we have like episode after episode after episode of the Windermerians conquering the Brisingar cluster, just destroying outright like fleets of new UN spacey forces, just enslaving the population with their mind control and attacking chaos and inflicting losses and whatever on them. And it's just, yeah, it's like as much as you might paint the new UN spacey as villains, it's just like these guys are like being shown episode after episode all of their crimes over and over again. And I think the one of the problems is too is like the glee with which like a lot of the knights sort of
yeah.
engaged in their combat. Like they're clearly enjoying themselves, and like the death of Messer was something that really hit like a lot of viewers hard. And like I know I don't think I can ever forgive Keith for what he did. But maybe that's just me. Maybe that says something about me as a viewer. But yeah, it's just so far I'm clearly on one side. If they're trying to present some sort of moral ambiguity with the characters, so far it's definitely not working for me.
It's funny that you say that though, because it is war, and you say something like you can't forgive Keith for what he did, but you'd be expecting something like that to happen more often in a war situation.
For sure,
you
yeah,
know
absolutely, yeah. And you can look at it from the flip side as well. I mean, they lost that one aerial knight to was it
Hayate.
Hayate, right?
Yeah,
But the thing is that I understand like what they're trying to accomplish, but we just don't have the time and investment in the opposite side that they're trying to show. Right? Like it's not
yeah.
like a Gundam situation where, you're like, I don't mean to use Gundam, but it's a good analogy where
How
you
dare you?
have a story which really like shows the both sides of characters, because both sides of a war story, because the story itself is actually showing, like actually spending episode time showing you those characters, and you're getting to know those characters, and you're following them throughout their struggles. Like you learn almost as much about like Char as you do about Amuro, right? And so it's just like in this situation, it feels like they're trying to do that with the Windermerians, but 90% of the time and the character work that we're spending is with the characters of Chaos, right? we're seeing everything of the story through their eyes, and we're experiencing their losses, we're experiencing their sadness, their victories, their like whatever, their struggles, all that sort of stuff. And the Rognans and like everybody else, we're experiencing all their stuff. The Windermereans, if we do spend time on Windermere, we do talk about it, it's usually like after the fact. Like they've
Yeah.
already gone through their suffering and this is all just history. And it's like, well, we can't really engage or feel sympathy for characters we've never met or never seen, right? All we can do is feel get a relationship going and feel sympathy for characters that are in the story of Macross Delta right now in each of the episodes that we watch so far, 1 through 14, right? So it's like, yeah, it's just and I don't think that the balance is there. Definitely not.
And I agree with that because, like, I'm interested in the Knights because of a separate publication that's about them. The Aerial Knights manga. I forget the actual title, but it's like something about black wings or whatever.
White Knights on Black
That one talks
Wings.
about, there it is, the White Knights on Black Wings manga, and that one talks about the development of the Knights from the time they were children. Like Keith is like 12 years old when the events of this story is going on, because it can actually take the time to stop and like be like, this is what these people have gone through. Whereas with this one, I feel like when they're trying to do that, it's kind of like, here you go, this is what I've gone through, but we've got to move on because we've got a lot more story to cover and we only have so many episodes to do it in. So I think if I wasn't reading that in addition to watching the show, that I would not have that extra like insight into the Knights. Like I have to have the supplementary material in order to get it, which I think is the anime falling short.
Oh,
I shouldn't
absolutely.
I
Yeah.
shouldn't have to have the supplementary material
Absolutely.
to
Yeah.
connect with the bad guys
Yeah.
that way.
I mean, I've always been one for like enjoying the official trivia and like other like tertiary publications and stuff like that, adding to the world of Macross and sort of building it and creating it and making it up. But at the end of the day, the actual animated productions, they have to stand on their own, and you have
Exactly.
to judge them based on what's in text. This is actually a trap that I find a lot of fans fall into, not just with anime, but just with any sort of piece of entertainment. When you enjoy it, you can easily make up like excuses and like reasons and come up like invent even your own story to sort of deal with deficiencies, to deal with story deficiencies that like might bother other viewers who didn't get as much out of the same piece of entertainment that you did. But at the end of the day, whatever you invent to sort of like gloss over the problems doesn't erase the problems of any particular piece of entertainment. You have to judge it on its face by what's in text. You might have come up with a very simple, very easy explanation to understand a plot hole or a character motivation or an event that happened and whatnot, but that's still your interpretation that is not in text. It is not on the script level, right? And it has to be in there for us to sort of like fairly judge. And like I said, right now, just going back to the Macross Delta specifically, I think right now, as much as the writers are trying to create some form of moral ambiguity, or at least paint some different sides to both, paint a more balanced story to both sides of the actual conflict that's happening. I definitely don't feel it as far as the Windermerean side. I'm definitely like feeling far more involved with the characters of Chaos, their story, their plight, and everything that's going on with the planets of the Bersinger cluster than I am with anything on the Windermerean side.
We're guaranteed to get in more into the whole Windermere thing.
Now that we've nitpicked the Windermerians, on to the
Uh,
rest of the episode.
All right, so we get back to the island ship. We see Freya helping out the civilians, and Kaname tells her to take a break. And she makes up a lie about having to feed Kirurun and joins up with Hayate and Mirage.
Yeah, I don't know why she had to lie about that.
Me neither. I was hoping you'd explain.
She's like, I gotta feed Cutidoo, and then she goes to eat lunch with her friends, and I'm like, Kaname just told you to take a break. It's okay. Like, just go eat lunch with them. You don't have to explain yourself. But this was also the episode where they were kind of forcing the triangle a little bit more, which I didn't really care for, and I think that was kind of the start of that idea of, Freya's gonna sneak off to go hang out with her friends, but she really just wants to be with Hayate and doesn't want Mirage to be left alone with Hayate type of thing. But
Mm.
yeah, it was just why. I felt it was unnecessary for her to lie. There were a lot of things about this episode that was unnecessary. That's just the start of it. But it did lead to us finding a little bit more about Hayate, though,
Uh-huh.
when they were all eating together. Both of his parents were military personnel, and that's why he's traveled all over the place as a kid. And apparently, his dad would send him just really strange souvenirs all the time. Like the necklace is not the only thing that he's received from his dad. And he'd get like kind of an enigmatic note with each of them because he couldn't, he can't say where he is. Um, but he would send him little notes with the stuff, and even saying that because he moved around a lot, that when he set out on his own, that's why he moved around a lot as well, was just trying to kind of find where he belonged. And that was when they were all talking about how Ragna's kind of their place, and why it's their place for different reasons. And I thought that the sequence about Hayate's dad was kind of a nice lead in for the stinger scene we get in the next episode.
The singer scene?
The stinger scene, like the after credit scene.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's get into the next scene where the island ship loses power, there's an explosion, and there's a hole in the canopy, and then they have to scramble to fix it.
I think it's good, actually. I like that they address this sort of stuff, like the fact that the ship is severely underpowered and that it wasn't prepared to be flying around in space ever, like possibly ever again. And so the crew of the Chaos and Delta Squadron and Walkure and stuff, they're really having to sort of wing it and just try to, make the best of a bad situation. And again, it also puts new unified government into a really poor light again, because this is what their actions on Ragna have forced the Ragnans to do, right? This is the dire straits that they've put them in. I really like the tension in this episode and the dramatic tension that they're creating in the story and like the plot of Macross Delta overall, especially with the putting the Ragnans on the line here, right? And seeing that it's their struggles that are going on because of like what the new unified government did, and also because of the Windermereans and their war as well, right? But yeah, I think this sequence is quite good, actually, and it's a familiar sequence now. I think a little to a certain degree. I mean, we've seen, like, how many times have we seen like a city or an island class ship be put in jeopardy because of equipment failures or attacks or anything else like that. So it's not necessarily all that new, but it feels a little bit more like Battlestar Galactica-ish. It feels a little bit more like a bunch of displaced people running from their home that they've had to flee. Instead of a colony going out to colonize a new world, it's sort of like they've already colonized their world and have been forced to leave because of really bad circumstances. And they're sort of like a ragtag fleet of whoever's left. They don't have all the resources they need. They don't have all the time they need. And so yeah, so I think it adds a little bit. I enjoyed the sequence so far.
Which sequence? Like the entire sequence that where they try to fix the island ship, or just
Well,
the whole?
I think the like both of them, like the whole at the beginning, which sort of like creates the dramatic tension for the rest of the episode, and then when later on in the episode when they go on to fix it. And actually, I've got a couple funny things to say about that as well. But yeah, I like it all, actually. I think it all works really well.
Yeah, I think it kind of like took a weird turn with all the sexual innuendos that started coming up in the
All
middle
the
of the
Oh yeah,
episode.
unnecessary
God.
stripping.
Yeah, we've really got it. Like, yeah,
All right,
I'm gonna.
Celia, why don't you list down all the starting with the Mercats doing it right in front of them?
Were the Mercats doing it? I thought
There
they were
were they
playing.
weren't
I
they weren't,
I
totally
but
thought
don't.
they were playing.
but it seemed like
Nah, no, they were. Yeah, there was.
no, they weren't. But
They weren't doing, like, they weren't engaging in coitus or anything, but it's just like they
God.
were. Yeah, there was definitely meant to. You were definitely meant to, especially from the dialogue and of course the scene that they were talking about. You were definitely meant to read more of an intimate sort of interpretation into what the Mercats were doing than just playing, for sure. And it also looked like they were like engaging in, like, more than just like they weren't really necessarily like chasing a ball or chasing each other around and stuff like that. They were kind of like engaged in some sort of, not necessarily full out, but it was just like, yeah, they're.
well, if you pull the camera up just a little bit, you'd definitely be asking what they were doing, right?
What are these two meerkats doing?
They going on about.
Could have our own
Yeah.
we have our own Macross nature special here.
Celia.
Oh god. Yeah, so there was quite a bit of fan service in that sequence. So like the actual repair sequences were neat. Like, when Chuck and Arid are out in their VF-31s and they're reconnecting cables and the Elysian, docks onto the island ship, like that part was cool. And like Walkure's initial presentation at the beginning of Neostream was pretty neat. Like I thought visually it looked pretty cool. But when Hayate and Mirage started stripping, I didn't quite understand what the purpose was, other than let's give the fans some service. And that felt was more of that like forcing of the triangle that I had mentioned earlier,
Hmm.
where like Mirage and Hayate are trying to like move this heavy machinery so that these giant cables, which I don't know how the two of them could have ever put those two cables together by themselves because they're so big and they are very tiny people. When they're trying to do that, and because the communicator's breaking up, like they sound like they're making really lewd sounds over the communicator. And Freya like freaks out about it in the middle of their performance, and Kaname kind of scolds her, like focus on what you're supposed to be doing. And I'm like, okay. That's more of that forcing the triangle type of thing that I wasn't super happy with. And like, there are some things where you could argue, I guess, that, where the stripping would make sense. Like the first thing I thought of is like the Mega Tokyo comic. There's a character who strips down to his underwear when he's building computers because his clothes generate static. So he strips naked to build computers. I don't think there was any need for it in this episode. It
That's
was
weird.
it
Stop.
is weird. It's a recurring joke in the comic. It's weird, but it actually has like a little bit of explanation to it. Hayate just started like throwing off his jacket, and
Yeah, I mean,
then was all like, "Come on, Mirage," and she's all like, "I'm too
I thought I
shy,"
missed
and then
something.
I'm gonna do it.
no, you did not. You did not. I
There
mean,
was
I
no
would have appreciated
explanation.
I would have definitely appreciated some sort of explanation, even though I think like, I mean, stripping down to build computers and stuff like that. I mean, it's pretty fucking thin. That's very thin. But I mean, at least it's something. In this sequence, like I think the most egregious problem here is that there wasn't even any attempt to like justify or even explain why the hell both of the characters felt the need to suddenly strip off all their clothing. Like, what was that all about? I remember watching the episode and thinking, "Wow, man, I could probably spend like an hour come up with some invented reason for why they would do this." And I just can't even be asked. I was like, yeah, very disappointed in this whole thing. It was like there's fan service and then there's like blatant fan service and then there's like this is on a whole new level. And the I guess it's sort of mitigated by the fact that as much as it is blatant fan service, it's also pretty damn mild. Like, there's not really any nudity in it at all. And everything is pretty like harmless as far as what they're doing. It's a crisis situation. Even like trying to read something into it, it's just ridiculous. Of course, these two characters they we wouldn't be going on with this like in the middle of a crisis. That's absurd. And the fact that some of the characters like Freya even entertained the idea, I think speaks more to like I guess insecure and immature Freya is more than anything else. Because it's like obviously like everybody's doing their best to try and save the island from utter disaster. I mean, no one's gonna have the time to take a break to get a quick one on the side. I mean, come on. I mean, it's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. And yeah, it doesn't I felt like it didn't work on any level and I was very disappointed with it all.
Yeah, I wasn't too impressed with it. I was like, all right, well, they strip so that they can have a scene where Mirage presses her boobs into Hayate's back and gets embarrassed by it. Okay, that serves no purpose in this current situation.
It
Yeah.
serves no purpose because there was no reaction from Hayate. I think if he just gave a little reaction at the end, or even like maybe he gets embarrassed too, I think it would solve the problem. You know what I mean?
I agree.
Not
Yeah,
why they
Yeah.
absolutely.
stripped,
Yeah.
but it would solve the problem why they brought it up. But the
They got
fact that he
like
had no reaction,
yeah, or that the reaction he did have was to be like angry and irritated. about the whole thing rather than anything else. Like not necessarily that event, but just the fact that he was, yelling at Mirage for not like, pulling hard enough and whatnot, and not helping him do the job that they have to do in order to save the ship and thousands of people that are on board. So yeah, it was. I just felt it was really inappropriate and just didn't work at all. And again, like Alex, I totally agree with you in that it did not engage Hayate in the love triangle at all, which has been one of the problems of the show so far. Is just the fact that he is not engaged on any conscious level. Maybe subconsciously, but I mean that's not really been played out in the scripts either.
Yeah.
You couldn't even you'd have a tough time making that argument as well. Yeah, the story so far just isn't engaging him in the love triangle. And each episode where they do have some sort of story element that does deal with the love triangle, it's usually just like some sort of tension between Freya and Mirage
Yeah.
over and over and over again. Like this episode, of course, is another one where Freya is feeling jealous because she's hearing, like, over the loud communicator, like that, Mirage and Hayate are like struggling to get this, power cable together so they can save the ship. And it sounds really like lewd, to her eyes because she's not seeing the visual component of what they're doing. We've tread this ground before, and it really wasn't all that interesting the first like half dozen times. So I'm really not impressed with this. And I mean, in a previous episode where we complained about the love triangle and some of the weaknesses of it, we could easily forgive that because we could complain about it, but we'd easily dismiss it because the rest of the episode was good. But in
Hmm.
this episode, I find the fan service is so like just blatant and silly, and like it's not titillating, it's not funny, it's not anything. It's just like it becomes irritating. And then when you add like the fake, the replayed tension between Frey and Mirage on top of it, it just becomes like very tiresome, very disappointing, and just like very irritating.
We're all just waiting for something to wake Hayate up on the whole triangle thing, and this could have been a good one, and it was totally glossed over.
Yeah.
With Celia, like when you're mentioning the Walkure song, I have to totally disagree. When Mikumo came out and started singing, my attitude towards it was like, "Oh, not now, Mikumo." Like the singing is like it's just too much right now. Like everybody's kind of like dying. There's no air. There's no food. And then I don't know if the singing would have done it for me in this episode.
What I got, and I may have been like maybe drawing too much interpretation from the subs, but the way I saw it is that they kind of had already been planning this concert for the refugees anyways. And Machina and Rain are like, well, now's as good a time as any. Let's do this. I guess kind of more as of a distraction to keep people
Hmm.
from panicking over the repair, like the immediate repairs that need to be done, because
Hmm.
their fold reactors were about to go into meltdown. Like the coolers weren't working and they were running low on power. And then there are giant holes in the island ship from the explosions, the two explosions that happened. So I think they were initially planning that concert anyways, and then once the situation escalated, Machina and Reina just made the call, like, "Yep, we're gonna do this," and it did. Like none of the people seemed to be immediately distressed about everything that was happening. And by the time the Elysion was getting ready to dock, is when people were then their attention was drawn away from the concert, and they're like, "Oh, it's the Elysion, hooray!" type of thing. So I know that's what it's for. Like the concert wasn't anything extraordinary. I thought it was a neat way to introduce NeoStream because at the time the episode came out, the album wasn't out yet, which is why on Twitter I recognized it as a different song and not as NeoStream because I hadn't heard it yet.
Oh.
But yeah, that's about it though. I mean, they weren't curing anybody or having a sing off with the wind singer, so you know.
I wasn't really bothered by it, to be honest. I definitely understand the concerns that some viewers had, especially the two of you. But yeah, that didn't really bother me because I mean, Walkure has sort of been set up as like their function in the show, and on a like just on a plot level is sort of to use music to solve like their problems, to like create ways to make things work where they might not have worked otherwise. So that's sort of their power, their special ability. And I mean, it is a little bit contrived, but I think within like the context of a show like Macross Delta, it's nothing that would really bother me. It's no different than we've seen this before in Macross shows and in other anime as well, where you have like a character who is solving a problem that's clearly out of their scope, and they use like their mecha or their fighting abilities or something like that to solve an issue which is clearly something that needed to be solved through political means, through leadership means, through charisma, through like a bunch of other ways, right? And it's a problem that never could have been solved in that way, but they do it anyway because that's the show. And I think that's kind of what's happening here. And it doesn't really bother me all that much. Like I said, I had much bigger problems with this episode than that. Much bigger
Yeah.
problems. So I think that's a pretty minor thing. And that's just personal, that comes down to personal taste as well. When I get into a show like Macross Delta, I have like I'm pretty lenient with my suspension of disbelief and just like logical jumps as well, just because I know I'm there for a certain, I'm here for certain things, to get certain things out of this anime, and that's not, yeah, that's not really what I'm concerned with. So yeah, it was okay for me. It was fine.
I think we've had something similar in Frontier also. Cheryl's Shinku no Diamond Crevice. Like when they're all, I can't remember the exact episode, but it's like in the 20s, so it's towards the end. And they're underground, like they have to seek refuge. And she's singing amongst all these people that are taking refuge on the Frontier fleet during, I think, a big Vajra attack. It's been like 3 years since I've watched this, so I can't remember exactly.
No, I think
But
you're remembering correctly as far as I
but
know.
yeah, and she starts singing that song, and at first, the people that are with her are like, "What are you doing?" but then she continues to sing her song, and it kind of adds some ease to the situation for the people that are at least trapped with her. So they're
Mm.
not immediately thinking immediately about what's going on and being and panicking about that type of thing.
Mm. True. I think it was just knowing that it had been used in other shows, in other animes and other Macross episodes. I think for me it was just I don't know why it just didn't fit for me.
I also know Neostream's not your favorite, Alex.
Yeah, the English just bugged me. But no, that's the only one
It's
I listened
not
to.
as bad as it could be. It is not as bad as it could be.
Just leave it at that. Um,
Well, I will say
yeah,
there is one thing that did, like, another piece that did kind of like, and it's actually kind of silly more than anything else. Like I'm not bothered about it in as much as I am kind of like just like think it's really ridiculous and amusing. It's just the way the Elysian talked with the island.
I
that's what I was
know,
just about
right?
to ask.
Like it was so ridiculously phallic, it was like, oh my god, it's like it literally, it's coming into the island basically. Number one, the Elysian is like obviously humanoid shaped, and it's got a huge cod piece, as part of its design, as many mecha and anime do. And then you've got it approaching this big round island from behind, right?
Yeah.
It's coming from the aft end of the ship, and it just like plugs its crotch right into the back of the ship. I was like, this is over the top, like masculine sexual imagery, even for Macross.
Not to
Like,
mention that they were doing it to plug a hole, right?
yeah, like just to literally plug a hole. I was like, oh my god, like Freud would have a field day with this episode. It's just, yeah, yeah. I mean, it kind of bothered me, but I'm more like just rolling my eyes in amusement at it and laughing at it more than anything else. So maybe that's it. Maybe it's not even that bad of a thing, because I'm definitely having more fun with it than I am angry. But it's still pretty like absurd, you know.
Yeah, that was pretty.
It's so silly. Like, especially that it happened in this episode, which has had like one of the worst and most blatant uses of fan service in the entire series to date. It felt like, yeah, it felt like another kind of like, oh God, here we go. Because we haven't had enough of this episode so far, you know. Here we have the Macross Elysian literally screwing Ragna City, just ridiculous.
That's the thing about this episode that I'm not really feeling is like there's this dramatic tension with, oh no, our ship is not in the shape it should be and we're running low on supplies, and somehow we have to return to Ragna because they have a new command from Lady M by the end of the episode.
Yeah, yeah,
But then there's all this silly stuff in there. And we've had silly stuff before and it worked. But I
yeah.
feel like this time around it was kind of
Over the top.
weirdly juxtaposed with the serious tension of the situation. And I think
Yeah,
that's
that
why it didn't
was
work for me.
Yeah, that's another thing that bothered me as well because they were, like I said, I really kind of liked the ship in jeopardy idea. Like I said, it's not necessarily anything new, but it seemed to work really well within like I said within the context of the larger story and just in the within the context of the episode itself. You know, like they really built up the tension well. They really made the stakes clear, and it was believable too. It's like this is a 30-year-old ship that hasn't like had to fly in space for like a generation or more, you know, and it makes sense that they would be running into like some serious trouble and have to overcome some obstacles, maybe even to survive, you know, and they might not have all the tools to do it. And I thought it was a great idea. It was an excellent idea, especially in the aftermath of a big battle episode. It was kind of
Yes.
neat to go through this sort of sequence where it's just slowly building tension and all the characters have to really put their heads together and really think in order to make this a situation that they can get out of. Like Celia says, it just have all these ridiculous elements to it that just fly in the face of everything that they're trying to accomplish dramatically. Yeah, it was just unfortunate, very unfortunate. Definitely a lost opportunity in my mind.
That's a lot better than a filler episode, you know.
I suppose, yes. It's always better
Yeah.
than one of bottle episodes are never very good. So yeah, let's be thankful this is not one of those, I guess. But that doesn't mean we can't we can't call
No,
it on what it's doing
whoever said
wrong.
that we didn't complain about anything.
Guess what we just
Yeah.
did?
All right, all you haters. This is the episode of the recap show that you can really get on board with.
Yeah, Celia, you were mentioning something from Lady M that
Yeah.
came.
So by the end of it, after Captain Johnson docks the ship on the
Oh my God,
on the
Captain
series,
Johnson.
yeah,
Oh, I didn't even
yeah.
think about that part.
See, now I appreciate that a lot more.
You know, it's so bad too, because like just another aspect of this whole like the Elysian docking with the Ragnan's island ship.
God.
It's so bad because we've seen like just in the last Macross series, Macross Frontier, how every time the ship was docked with an island class ship, it was in its cruiser mode,
Yeah,
which just makes this part where it's docking in its attack mode and
It's
it's
just
doing
so
so with its
goofy.
crotch, it makes it that much more like over the top and ridiculous and unnecessary. It's like this would never like happen except for somebody thought it would be hilarious to have Captain Johnson dock his big ship with the crotch in the back of an island class vessel, you know?
God.
Just like, oh my God.
and it
So
does kind of ruin that memory of like why the SDF-1 had to transform in the first place. It's like now this is the
yeah,
reason why the
this is what
Elysion
it's
had to transform.
this is what we've descended to. one, one spacecraft in Macross, butt fucking another. It's just like
Sullied my memory.
it's
I'm
just
surprised they didn't have like a scene where like the kids like, oh look, it's the Macross Elysion, and then the mom would be like, cover your eyes, son, it'll be over soon. You know?
yeah.
Oh,
There's nothing discreet about this bit of buggery, that's for sure.
oh my God.
It's like it's pretty much in your face, over the top, and just so silly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, by the
Right.
time we get through the silliness, we find out that we have a new directive from Lady M. Even
Yeah.
though they have barely enough power to make it back, she managed to pull some strings and get some make some new alliances with some mining companies. I think it was,
Hmm.
and so they could actually have money to get more stuff, so that they can liberate the cluster from the Windermerians. We're gonna take back the cluster.
I know. Like I just want to comment on that, but then it involves the next episode, so I guess we'll just wait until we get into it.
Yeah, this took us 13 episodes for them to take the cluster. So now I'm like, all right, we're just gonna undo 13 episodes of story. Nice, guys. But you never know how it's gonna go. So
Well, I don't know. I kind of like that aspect of the show for definitely. I like that it's been. I like that it's been like basically a big long losing battle for the good guys the entire series. It's kind of yeah, it's kind of fun.
Yeah, it's been good so far. Hopefully, the next half will be just as good.
Yeah.
Big giant misstep. Episode
I
14, but
wouldn't. Yeah, I mean, as much as we complained about it, I wouldn't. I definitely wouldn't call it
no, it
that.
was fun.
But
It was fun.
it was
It's just
overall
silly.
it was fun, and I guess it's still enjoyable as a Delta episode. It's unfortunate, that this was kind of like just stupid and not very engaging on a character level, and just like ridiculously over top with the fan
Yeah,
service, and just like silly, like one like stupid silly thing, and so many of the things sort of like undercut what the rest of the episode's story was trying to do. So I just, yeah, it was kind of like I think it was a missed opportunity, definitely. It started out strong, but then it kind of like went off the rails, and yeah, just descended into utter slapstick. So yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see. Hopefully the rest of the series can avoid episodes like this, and we'll get back to the show that we've been enjoying so far.
oh my god,
cool.
we still have to talk about 15.
I was gonna say, you guys want to just get into episode 15 now?
Let's do it. Let's do it. I know
Let's
it's I
do
know
it.
it's late, but we're like really into it right now, and we're having some really good conversations. So let's keep that energy going.
All
All right.
right.